Yes, this week we had some big news of the food services guidance being released. And, for some of you, this is very timely. You look at this chart right here, it tells you where your regions are at. Currently, we're going to have projected, we have 5 regions to start phase 3 tomorrow. That hasn't been confirmed at this point. It's a solid chance, a very high chance, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. It may be confirmed today. It may not be confirmed until tomorrow morning, but it's projected to begin tomorrow. So just be prepared that it may be confirmed today, may be confirmed tomorrow. We just don't know yet. Next week it's projected that the Western New York and Capital Region are going to begin. And, for welcome Mid-Hudson and Long Island to phase 2. Don't worry, a lot of the guidance that came out for phase 3 is exactly the same. It requires very little change on your part other than it's stuff that's going to be inside. Our New York City brewers, we've got some time, but that's just more time to prepare for what has to be done. Looking at these phases of reopening, right? I had this slide the last time too. It's outdoor food services and food services. That should indicate to you that a lot of this guidance is very similar, and it is. One thing to look at too before we go too far into detail on this, your brewery may have a few different places that you need to look at your guidance for, right? If you have a big office setting, you need to read and affirm that office guidance. If you, manufacturing, you should read and affirm that guidance as well. I'm sure lots of you are already following that guidance. You can put your manufacturing, what you're doing there, into your plans for outdoor or takeout, or for your food services. It can all kind of blend together. You need one plan at least for what your operations are doing. The safety plan template that is on New York's website is a great place to start. It's not, it's a great place to start, and you're going to want to keep taking a look at it, keep thinking about these different issues, especially when we're moving from outdoor beer service to indoor. There are going to be some changes there that you may need to tweak your safety plan. We're gonna discuss that. The main thing about these safety plans, right, and all of this guidance, we're looking at 4 different guidance documents right there that are potentially applicable to your brewery. That is overwhelming, and it is hard to grasp what's happening. There are 4 main cornerstones, right, for all of this. Number 1, face coverings. Your employees have to be wearing face coverings. People need to be, customers need to be wearing face coverings when they're not seated. They can't, be standing around milling about without face coverings on. 2, social distancing. Everybody has to be 6 feet apart from each other, unless you're seated at the same table. Then you don't have to be 6 feet apart from each other, but you do need to be 6 feet apart from the other tables. 3, you got to look at sanitizing. How are you going to be sanitizing your tables? How are you going to be disinfecting high-touch surfaces? That's a really important thing to take a look at. And, finally, screening. How are you screening your employees? Are you doing temperature checks? Are you asking them questions when they arrive? Really take a look at that. Just remember, those 4 things are the questions you need to, those are the things you need to be really thinking about throughout your business, in your office setting, and then in your tap room. Some of you are going to be lucky enough to open your tap rooms, hopefully tomorrow. This is just a screenshot of the 2 different guidance documents. You're going to need to read and affirm both guidance documents for outdoor, if you're doing outdoor, and takeout and delivery. So if you're doing delivery or takeout, and you're not doing outdoor, you need to still read and affirm that detailed guidance that exists right now. Okay, that's just baseline. You need to read and affirm it if you are doing takeout and delivery food services, even without outdoor seating. But separately, when you're going to switch into indoor seating, you will need to read and affirm the detailed guidance for food services, is what it's called. Even if you're not serving food, you have to read and affirm it. One thing to remember, this affirmation, it's a little tricky, but you pull open this guidance document, and at the very bottom, it's on the last page, you take a look at there's a link right there. You click that, you fill that out. That's the affirmation. You do not need to submit your safety plan with that affirmation. I see that we got a question too, and I will answer those, but feel free to throw questions in throughout this. A lot of it is going to be very similar to the webinar that was, I did last week, because a lot of the guidance is exactly the same. The biggest part that is about how we're going to be serving beer is how are you thinking of rethinking your layout of your space? Outdoor space, the biggest change, this right here, this is the biggest change between the two guidance documents. In the phase 2 guidance, the outdoor space one, it's defined as an open air space without a fixed roof. Okay, but for phase 3, which is interesting, outdoor space is defined as an open air space designated for the consumption of food and or beverage, which may have a temporary or fixed cover, so long as such cover has at least 2 open sides for airflow. So that, I think, provides, it's fair to say that is the definition of outdoor space to even use for phase 2. If you have, an awning that is out, that is, let's just say, for example, you have a space where you have one garage door here, another garage door here, in your building, both of them are up. That indicates that such cover has, 2 open sides for airflow. It's very unclear, though, at this point, what they're, going to be willing to say is outdoor space. I'm not saying, don't go to your brewery right now and just think that, opening a window, that's not enough to create outdoor space. It's not enough to open a window and then open the door and say, well, we have 2 open sides for airflow. No, it wants fully open sides, right? That's what this means here. You need to be able to have people be able to walk in and out of those sides. I'm not saying that people should walk in and out, but that's what open sides means. It's not just an open window. It is, just take a look at that. Think about that if you are, a place that does have the awning. Take a look at this too. So I'm going to be blending the 2 guidance documents together because they are very fungible. They're very similar except for that distinction, and which is helpful, right? That's great. That's consistency is king for this. If you're taking a look at your tables, right, outdoors and indoor, your tables need to be 6 feet apart from each other. You can have a maximum of 10 people seated at each table, but that's a maximum. What hasn't necessarily been answered is, what to do about bars, right? If you don't have bar stools, how are people supposed to be seated? It's a great question. Bar space, generally people are standing up, but what's very clear in this guidance document is customers need to be seated in order to have their masks off. If customers are not seated, they have to be wearing a mask. They can't just be walking around and drinking. So, I encourage you to take that and, when applying that to your bars, think about how you're going to have chairs there that people have to sit on. If people want to be at the bar, they have to sit on these chairs. If there's not enough chair space at the bar, then they have to have a mask on. They can't be drinking beer. It's to really delineate how people are supposed to be seated and drinking, who's serving, who's not being served. If it's not possible to have your tables inside be 6 feet apart, I'm thinking about like booths, you know what I mean? You can't move a booth really. You can enact physical barriers between the tables, right? You can put up plexiglass between the tables. Those physical barriers have to be at least 5 feet in height, and they can't block fire or emergency exits. So you think about it, the booth is the easiest one to think about it with. You have the booth, you put a 5 foot tall plexiglass or plastic covering there to cover the, have that physical barrier between tables. Yes, it's not aesthetically pleasing, but it's what we have to do right now in order to be authorized to serve people indoors. The best practice here would be don't do this. Have people be seated at least six feet apart from each other. But in the event that you are a small tap room and that's quite frankly impossible to do, you got to put up those barriers. That's crucial. So I'm seeing some questions pop up, and so one of them is no standing high top tables, even if they're spaced 6 to 8 feet apart from another table. It's a great question. The guidance says that customers have to be seated in order to, they must be seated, and if they're not seated, they have to wear a mask. That to me is pretty clear, that, the standing high top tables may not be allowed in this case. But if you have the ability to put any type of chair there, I would recommend it. I don't agree with that. I don't think it makes much sense. But we need to tread carefully here, right? The last thing that we want to do is have people, lose your license because of a high top table. But it's a really good question. It's one, I want to dig a little bit further into as well, just because it doesn't make sense to me that wouldn't be allowed. But the guidance is clear at this point that you have to be seated in order to be served. If customers, another question is, can a customer carry their own beer from the counter when they order it in the tap room? Yeah, they can. You can have countertop service, and I will go over that in a little bit, what to do there. So no worries. We'll touch on that in a further slide. So one thing, this is just the layout part of it, right? Remember that your bar staff have to be 6 feet apart from each other, and customers at all time, temporarily showing up to, if you have a server who's running tables, that person can temporarily approach the table within 6 feet to put down the drinks. Turning to some more customer issues too, looking at the inside of it. We're just turning to the inside part. Again, customers not seated have to be wearing a face covering. Customers can only enter with a face covering. If a customer enters without a face covering and they're not below 2 years old, which, that's the minimum age that you have to wear a face covering at, or they say they have a medical condition, that's where we run into the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? So if a customer comes up and says, I can't wear a face mask, I have a medical condition that prevents me from wearing a face covering, you can ask what the face covering is. excuse me, you can't ask what the medical condition is. Your job at that point is to reasonably accommodate that customer or an employee who has that issue. That may be if they are coming there to drink, that may be, okay, please wait outside until your table is ready. Once you've been seated at your table, please don't get up. Please limit your getting up, because people can have their face coverings off at the tables. Best practice may be, would you be willing to eat outside? Fine. But it's, if you have face shields, face shields are acceptable face coverings. And this is more of an employee one, right? So say you have an employee who says, I have a medical condition, I can't wear a face mask. What's tough here is that employees are breathing on food, on your drinks that you're serving. So a face shield is an acceptable face covering. And that's the plastic mask that goes across the whole face. They are supposed to be splash masks for surgery. They don't accomplish the same goal that face covering does. But that's okay. In this case, if it's your employee, you can offer your employee a face shield and say, I would like you to wear this face shield. If your medical condition doesn't allow you to wear a face covering, that's fine. Does it allow you to wear a face shield? If that employee says, yes, it allows me to wear a face shield, I can breathe just fine with face shield on, then, I would suggest that employee, though, is still not the one who's serving people's food. They can be the one maybe sanitizing booths. Perhaps if you're having a hostess or a host tell people to, seat people, have that person run through, that person be the one seating people. Just that way they're not breathing on people's food or drinks. That is, it's just something to really mull over. One other thing too about inside, your indoor capacity has to be limited to no more than 50% of your maximum occupancy as set by the certificate of occupancy exclusive of employees. So that's good news. For office guidance, that exclusive of employees doesn't exist. You are currently in the only industry where the exclusive of employees exists. So if you have a maximum occupancy of 50 people within your tap room, you have to limit it to 25 customers. I guess, my best guess is that most of you do have a maximum occupancy set by your certificate of occupancy. In the rare instance that you don't, for your tap room, think about social distancing, right? You need to set up those tables so that they're 6 feet apart. You need to be maximizing the distance that you're keeping, people away from each other. That's crucial. Turning again to the employees, I touched on this a little bit already. The face covering aspect, you have to provide your employees with face coverings. They have to wear them at all times. Employees that are bussing tables need to wash their hands or change their gloves before and after. If the employee is wearing gloves during non-food prep, they have to, replace those gloves frequently. You all know this at this point. Keep having people wash their hands. Have hand sanitizer everywhere. Have signs at places that are telling your employees to wash your hands all the time. Every time you're running back and forth from a table, wash your hands. It's a important thing to do, and it looks good as well. It also will look good for your tap room to have signs everywhere that say, please, encourage everybody to wash your hands frequently. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the signs in a little bit. Turning to screening, right? Screening of your employees, you have to cover these questions. It's have you, every day that they show up, gotta ask, have you knowingly been in close or proximate contact with a COVID positive person in the past 14 days? Have you tested positive for COVID-19 in the past 14 days? And or have you experienced any symptoms of COVID-19 in the past 14 days? That last question is a question that's really throwing a lot of people for the loop, rightfully so. It's a confusing question. I, for example, am somebody who has allergies. I often wake up in the morning and I have a headache, I have a runny nose, I don't feel great, but I don't have COVID. I just am allergic to nature. So, really think about this. That question requires more nuance than what's there. If an employee says, yeah, I'm experiencing, I have a headache, I have a runny nose, my best practice suggestion at that point is take that person's temperature, take that employee's temperature. If they have a fever, if they have above 100 degree temperature or 100.4, the temperature range has really been shifting lately as to what the acceptable temperature range is. And there's no clear guidance as to which acceptable temperature to use. So use whichever one you're more comfortable with. Then, if that employee doesn't have a fever, then, that may be okay. If the employee is saying, I'm experiencing serious body aches right now, well, that's a different story. That's something's wrong. In that case, that's a very different symptom from, yeah, I have a headache, I didn't drink enough water yesterday. So use some nuance with that. If you are taking employee temperatures, which, I think is a good practice to do not keep a log of those temperatures. Have somebody, every day you have to say, yes, I reviewed the employee health data for that day. You need to have one person, or if you're a large place, have 2 people or 3, but try to limit it. Say, yes, we did the screening for today. The, employee X was acceptable. Just go through and check it off. Put it in an Excel sheet. Check, 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 check. Great. And let's keep going. I'm just trying to get it back. There we go. That is, a very important thing. Don't maintain that log, but do maintain the log of your review. And this is just, kind of the hodgepodge slide. So I'll go through this slide, and then I see there's quite a few questions. I'll answer those questions, and then we'll keep carrying on. First thing, really, I know a lot of you have these signs. I know the New York State Brewers Association has beautiful signs to post places, the Brewers Pledge. Those are great. Post those everywhere. But have signs in your bathrooms that say, please wash your hands for 20 seconds. If you want to be, a lot of you are fun places, you're the best places to be, have a song, lyrics to a song that people have to sing in their head before they're done washing their hands. Staying Alive is one of them, the chorus of that song. It also works for CPR. Just whatever song that you love, just post those lyrics on a sign and say, wash your hands to this. Yes, it's kind of a gimmick, but it's hysterical, and everybody needs a good reminder as to how to wash their hands. Distance markers. Those are important for the countertop service component. So you can have customers seated outside, for example, or inside, but let's just use the outside example first. Say you have a table of 6 people. Say to that table of 6 people, look, we're not going to have a waiter come to you to take your order. Instead, have one of you come up to the counter. This is a best practice. Have one of you come up to the counter with all of your orders. They will, place the order in. If you want the customer to carry the beer back, that's fine. They can. If you would rather have a runner bring the beer back, that's also fine, but try to limit the number of people coming up to the bar. You want to have markers on the floor that say, this is the 6-foot distance that you need to keep from each other. What the question that hasn't been answered, right, is in that situation, say it's 2 people want to go up to the bar to place the order. You know, you would assume that those 2 people would be able to stand next to each other. They're going to be seated directly next to each other. But try to limit the number of people who are getting up to order. You don't really want that whole table of 6 to be getting up to order. It crowds, you know, especially for those of you who have smaller tap rooms, crowds the bar. You don't want to do that. Also, when customers get up to order, they have to wear a face mask. Ask them to wear a face covering. They need to be doing it. It's your business that's at risk if they don't. So it's a very serious thing. Training. Training your employees on all of these protocols, it's very hard. This is not an easy lift. And having, you know, people are getting used to this. People are, you know, generally getting used to, yes, we have to wash our hands all the time. Yes, we have to wear a face covering all the time. But training employees on how to tell customers, you have to be seated or else you have to wear a face covering. You know, you can't walk around with your beer. I've seen, you know, many bartenders are some of the best conflict de-escalators I've ever seen in my life. I have absolute faith that your staff will be able to do it and will be happy to do it. This is, you know, everybody really wants to get up and running again. In-person meetings, so your in-person staff meetings on this point, they're to be limited. If you are going to have a staff training on it, I would, if you have the space, do it outdoors. If you don't have the space to do it outdoors, keep people 6 feet apart when you're doing the trainings. But, you know, even if you need to, make a video explaining what it is that you need to do. But in-person trainings are generally the best because it allows people to ask questions. And it allows you to, you know, have that bond with your team. If you can, institute one-way traffic. So if you are having people come up to your counter and order, say you have 2 doors, and that's incredible. If you do have 2 doors, that allows you to have 1 door for indoor traffic and then 1 door for traffic that's leaving. That's great. You know, just limit the amount of people that have to come into cross contact with each other. People are getting used to it still. You see it in the grocery store. I'm terrible at it in the grocery store. I constantly am going the wrong way, but it is what it is. You know, put social distancing in any area, right? I put the waiting room there. That's just, you know, if people are waiting to be seated, either have them wait outside, have them seated, you know, if you have a place for them to sit before they're seated, just have them sitting there. Don't have them crowding with each other, but try to keep people 6 feet apart if they're not in the same, and definitely keep people 6 feet apart if they're not in the same parties. You know, payment methods. This is a really interesting area now. Best practice is contactless payment. If you can set up Apple Pay, it's great. Venmo, those types of things, it's wonderful. I know a lot of you use Square. That's great. I said this the last webinar, and I'll say it again this webinar. When you're doing these payment methods, you're going to want to limit your object sharing. So what that means is you're going to want to limit which pens people are touching. So if you have a bin full of pens that are sanitized, have people take from that bin to sign the check and put into a separate bin of dirty pens that need to be sanitized. You can do the same thing with Stylus pens, right? So say you order a bulk order of Stylus, you know, they're terrible to write with unless you get, you know, the real touchscreen pen. I'm not saying do that because these are expensive, but if you get, you know, just those Stylus with the rounded top, I don't have one next to me right now, but you all know what they look like. Those are very cheap. those are easy to sanitize. You can do the same thing with those. Yeah, are the people's signatures going to be legible? No. But does that really matter? Not necessarily. That's not what we're most concerned about at this point. You can have people sign with their fingers. That also works. But, using that Stylus pen is great because that can be sanitized. You're limiting who's touching the screen of that iPad that you're using, for example, or the tablet or what have you. It's a great way to just get around that issue. Hand sanitizer. Have it everywhere. Use it frequently. Disinfect everything frequently as well. Disinfect that, if you're, whatever you're using for your payment system, disinfect that. High touch areas. If you have one cash register, really consider only having one employee be the one to use that cash register at a time. Or if if you do have iPads that your servers can carry around, assign that person that iPad for that shift. No one else can really use that. No one else should use that iPad for that shift. Limit that object touching. All right. So I'm going to answer some questions now. We have quite a few. So, yep, I answered this one. When customers are at breweries, are they required to be seated when drinking? Yes. Can they be standing as long as they are 6 feet apart? No. Again, we don't, the guidance says they have to be seated, so they have to be seated. There may be further clarification on that point. It's something, again, I want to look into, but the guidance says they have to be seated, so we want to follow the guidance, especially at this point. We're just getting back open. Let's follow that. Can customers order from an area 6 feet from the bar and carry their beer into the outdoor seating area? Yes. Yes, they can. And that actually raises a really good point, too, that I forgot to touch on. Keep your bar staff 6 feet away from each other and from customers at all times. What that means is, have people be maybe a little bit further back when they order from a bar. I know the inclination for most people, myself included, is to get right up there on the bar and be like, well, this is what I want, but no, have people stand back to order. Maybe put a thing on the ground that says order from here. That's, depending on the length of your bar is probably 3 feet wide. Have that person stand 3 feet back. They can approach the bar to get their beer. But up until that point, keep them back. Can you turn away customers who refuse to wear a face covering, whether they have a medical condition or just refuse to wear the face covering? So that's it's a delicate issue. There is an executive order now that grants you the authority to turn away customers who refuse to wear a face covering but don't have a medical condition. If they say, I can't wear a face covering because I have a medical condition, then we have to go into the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that becomes a more complicated analysis. That is, you have to provide them a reasonable accommodation. That reasonable accommodation may be, we respect that, and we're going to have you seated over here, and we're going to, it's hard. I don't know. You can't necessarily turn that person away. If they say they have a medical condition, if they're just saying, I'm not wearing a face mask because I'm not wearing a face mask, then you can turn that person away, no problem. But I expect that this loophole of the medical condition is going to get out. It's going to become more popular for people to use as this goes on, which puts you in a really tough position, right? It's going to be easy for somebody to recognize that, all I have to say is I have a medical condition and I can't, they'll have to deal with me. A reasonable accommodation is reasonable. If you have outdoor seating, it may be, you have to sit outside. If you have, if it's indoor seating, you put them close to the entrance and you say, please don't get up, period. If you, unless you have to go to the bathroom, don't get up. It puts you in a tough position, but especially when your other customers are going to see that and say, why isn't this person wearing a face mask? You're not allowed then at that point to say, well, you don't want to run afoul of the Americans with Disabilities Act and say, well, medical condition issue, but there's no good answer, as my analysis that I just went through shows you. It puts you in a really tough spot, and it's going to probably vary from brewery to brewery with how you're going to deal with this. The thing about the people coming to eat or drink at your breweries is, when they are seated, they don't need to have a mask on. It's just when they're up and about that they need to have the mask on. If you have a person who comes in, says they have a medical condition, they can't wear the face covering, I would encourage you to have that person seated, have a server come and wait on them. Do not allow them to go up to the bar and order. I mean, really limit what they're doing when they're standing up, right? They can only go to the bathroom, and that's it. Maybe seat them close to the bathroom so they're not, running around your brewery without their face mask on. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of what to do, but there's no really good answer there. We have another one. Does the indoor plus outdoor capacity have to be 50% of the 50% occupancy issue? It is only indoor dining that you need to worry about that 50% occupancy issue. Okay, don't worry about it with your outdoor dining stuff. It is indoor dining only. It's only in the indoor dining period. So it's only in the indoor dining portion of the guidance. So follow that. So it's only for indoor. Any restrictions on glassware or flights? No. Nope. No restriction. There's nothing listed. I know a lot of breweries are using plastic cups. Don't feel like you have to. Best practice is probably wash everyone's cup after first use. Don't take it back to have it refilled. Bring them a new glass, but there's no requirement that you have to use plastic. And flights are fine. Flights are still good. Make sure you're sanitizing everything though, even the flight board. What is the legal, this is a little bit of a different question, and I'll try to answer it as best as I can. What is the legal authority of social tracers and how will they perform their task? Yeah, it's a great question, and we really, quite frankly, haven't seen them too much in action lately, or at all. For example, right? My mom is a contact tracer. She got that job. She's a retired teacher, and she has not gotten a call once about it. To be fair, she's also in a very rural county of maybe 30,000 people total, in the southern tier, where cases are, it's out of all of the positives, it's less than 1%. So we haven't seen these contact tracers really too much in action at this point because cases in New York have plummeted. With reopening, we're going to see more cases likely emerge. That, it remains to be seen what they're going to be doing. Their legal authority, they have the ability to call people and say, who have you been in contact with? Where have you been? All that jazz. It's unclear if people have to really answer that at this point. For public health purposes, the state does, as we all know at this point, the state has an enormous amount of power when it comes to public health issues. So this is, it's a fun, it's not a question I get often, this one. So I do appreciate it. I wish I had a better answer for you. Besides, we're going to find out perhaps what they're going to be doing in the next, few months, but we'll see. is it tables that need to be 6 feet apart or seats? It's tables. People seated at one table can be seated right next to each other. And they don't have to be from the same family or household. You don't have to ask that question. If a group of 10 friends shows up and they all want to be seated at a table and you have a table that seats 10 people, they can all be seated right next to each other. If you have a group of 15 people that shows up and they all want to be seated close to each other and they want to drag the tables next to each other, no, they cannot do that. Don't let them do that. That puts you at risk. It puts your license at risk. Don't do that. We don't want to go down that road. That grouping needs to be 6 feet apart at that point in separate tables. Split them up however you want, but that's just the way it goes. It's your license at risk. What if a customer needs to stand at a table for a few minutes and stretch and relieve back pain, but keep a drink in hand? Yeah, the guidance says they have to be seated to have their face coverings off. So, I mean, if they're going to be standing they have to stand at the table. Okay, they can stand at the table, but they should put that face covering on. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense in that case, but what the state is trying to avoid is the slippery slope, right? You want to avoid people congregating at the bar. You want to avoid people, everybody standing up the bar and then milling about like normal, right? We want to avoid that at this point. So, just consider that if they have especially if they have a cloth face covering on or a bandana. I've done this now quite a few times. You can drink by moving the face covering. They shouldn't really be doing that. But if if it is somebody who is just a nice person who has back pain, that's about as innocent as it gets for this type of answer. Okay. This is a good question, actually. Part of my outdoor area is a grassy area. If a customer brings a blanket and sits on the ground, does that satisfy being in your seat requirement as long as they are 6 feet apart from their nearest neighbor? I assume yes, but you never know. It's a great question, actually. That's an excellent question. The answer is not clear. And I think it really depends, the seated part, that's great. But what if you already are having people come to your outdoor area where that was like a common practice for people? You don't necessarily have tables. I get that tables are probably very hard to come by at this point too. I think that would be acceptable, but I also think that this answer may be subject to change fully with more guidance. But I think it's a great way to keep people separate. If your liquor license covers that, then that's the issue. But that's a good way to try to keep people apart. Same thing with if people are going to be coming and they bring their lawn chairs. God, then that's harder. The lawn chair one is harder. The blanket on the ground is more like a table. Say, if they come back and say, SLA comes to you and says, you can't do this, they need to have a table, put out a crate, put out a barrel or something that's at the ground level that would allow people to come and sit with a blanket out. It's not it's a very gray area here. It's really mushy. And I don't have a clear answer for you, but that's an excellent question. And the guidance really doesn't get into that. But just be careful with that one. Be very careful. But as long as they're, the biggest thing is we want to avoid really drawing attention to yourself as you don't want to be the brewery that didn't listen to this guidance. You don't want to be the brewery that's on the front page of your local newspaper for having too many people show up, right? You want to be the brewery that is, you are the safest brewery in town. You are the place that's safe to come and hang out So great question. Really, really, really smart question. Are we allowed to have air conditioning on or just open doors and windows? You can have the air conditioning on. It doesn't say in the guidance that you can't. I understand the airflow issue is, that's tough. The indoor airflow is, it's important, but you think about an office, for example, an office can have their air conditioner on right now. Best practice, if you have big windows, that's great. But if it's a hot day, I mean, we're entering the summer. It's going to be 90 degrees here today. I'm not sure I'd really want to go sit in a restaurant that didn't have, if you had the option of air conditioning, I maybe want that instead. Especially now. But, the air conditioning, the guidance doesn't say anything about it, but, just use your head too. You can have it on. All right. We have a nitpicking question. As tables are supposed to be 6 feet apart, are we measuring from table to table the distance, or from seat back to seat back of the chairs at the tables? Nitpicking, I know. No, it's actually very fair. It appears that it is from table to table, but this is one I want to get back to you on. If you, just hang around at the end of this webinar for another, just hang around for a hot second, what I'll do is I'll just pull open the guidance and I'll look through it really quickly to give you an affirmative answer to that question, because I'm pretty sure the guidance does say where the measurement is from. I just don't want to give you the wrong answer. It's safer to say I don't know than it is to make up one. If 4 people come in together, can they sit together at the bar and 6 feet away have the nearest customer that's not with them? Yeah. 4 people who come in together can sit at the bar together. The next, customer that's not with their party has to be 6 feet away from them. Easy. If your occupancy is 66 people, I can only have 33 people inside, right? But you can, again, this is just a question about the outdoor occupancy. Outdoor occupancy, that 50% occupancy requirement does not apply to your outdoor occupancy. What applies to outdoor seating is social distancing. Keep people 6 feet apart. That's the main thing. All right, so we got through those questions. We have a few more minutes. I just want to really quickly run through those SLA slides from the last time. Just they're worth mentioning again for those of you who weren't here. Just quick refresher. This is the New York Safety Plan, right? Great. Fill that out. It's very straightforward. You can have an attorney look it over. You can have, set up an agreement with us to have us look it over too. I highly recommend having another person look this over. Looking at, these are some SLA questions. Can I conduct tastings? Yes. Yes, you can. This goes back to that tasting question. Make sure if you're bringing out beer on a paddle for the tasting that you are disinfecting that paddle, right? Just disinfect everything all the time. Can the person consume alcoholic beverages without purchasing food? Yes, they can. There is a process now that you can go to SLA with to expand your outdoor premise. It's hard for me to say it. You have to email SLA within 5 days of that expansion with a diagram. If your municipality grants you that sidewalk permit, again, you have to shoot that over to SLA. This is the second question is the one that we've seen a lot. Live entertainment at the outdoor dining area. Concerts and other forms of live entertainment are not yet permitted. So at this point, they're not. Look perhaps to phase 4 when outdoor concerts would be permitted. If you are, you want to support those bands, those performers, you can, have videos of them. You can perhaps have a live stream of them, but, you don't want that live entertainment thing. It's really crucial that you follow that rule. This is, again, that municipality guidance. Just make sure you're working closely with your municipalities on that issue. So if you give me, just give me 2 minutes, I'll get your answer to you on the issue with the distancing between the chairs. So for those of you who don't want to stick around for that answer, that's fine. Thank you for being here. And for those of you who do want to stick around, just hold on tight. All right, I have it. It says, the guidance says, and I will actually, let's see if I can share this screen with you. Here you go. It's this line right here. It says, this is about the outdoor space, but it also applies to indoor. Seats must be at least 6 feet from any other table, chair, a table, seat, patron, or pedestrian. So it's from seat to seat, not, it appears to be seat to seat, but it says all tables with seats must be at least 6 feet apart. So it's a great question that doesn't appear to be clearly answered here. All tables with seats must be at least 6 feet apart from any other table, seat, or, table or seat. Indicates that either of those metrics are acceptable. And that is, that's, I would use that. Whichever one you need to use it consistently. Use it, just use that throughout. So if you're going to use from chair to chair, 6 feet different distance, fine, do that. If you're going to do from table to table, do that throughout your brewery, right? I understand that, it might be table to next chair, because from that, the way that phrase was written, it said it needs to be at least 6 feet apart from any other table or chair. So just do it consistently. Keep things 6 feet apart. I hope that helped that answer that question. Yes, this is being recorded. We will get you a copy of it. Can you clarify small groups who want to sit together at the tap room bar? Is there a group limit for this? Can a group of 10 customers sit at the bar together? Yeah. Yes, it appears that they can. If your bar has enough space to do it, they can. But remember, your server behind the bar has to be 6 feet apart from those customers. They can temporarily come into be close to those customers, but if you're going to have a server behind that bar, you got to limit that bar space, or you got to have, that you just got to be rethinking that, how that server is going to be. If you're going to have, you may need to think about, half of my bar is going to be for seating, and the bartender went over, that half of the bar doesn't have taps on it, so it's easier to have somebody, have people seated over there, versus, this half of my bar has the taps on it. This is where the bartender is going to work. This is the working area of the bar. This is where people will come up to order from. So try to really designate those spaces. It says must be away from a corridor. Does that apply to bar space? If people walk behind where patrons would be seated at the bar. I'm a little confused by this question. I'm just reading it again to make sure that I'm understanding. I would say that bar spaces, you want, okay, I got it. Here we go. If your bar is, right up against a corridor, say your bar is, the bathroom is where that wall is right there. You don't want people seated within 6 feet of where people are going to be walking by. You don't want, regularly. right? The issue here is you don't want to create prolonged contact. And prolonged contact is defined as being within 6 feet of somebody for 10 minutes or more. You don't want to create those areas of prolonged contact between customers. So if your bar is close to a place where people, are lining up to go anywhere, so say that corridor is, has the markers for your restroom, I wouldn't necessarily have people seated at that bar. It's going to be different from space to space. It's going to be different for brewery to brewery. I hope that answered your question. With that, I don't see any other questions. Thank you everyone, so much for attending. I really appreciate it. There will be a recording of this available. I'll get it to Paul as soon as it's ready, and the slides will also be available. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Paul. He'll get in touch with me. It all works out. So thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe. I can't wait to have a beer. In fact, I think I might right now. Bye.